Hello, this is Mike Swanson. This is a segment of the past American century. Why do the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, RFK, and Martin Luther King, all of which happened well over 50 years ago, matter today in the year 2018 in an environment in which the media and really public discourse is dominated with people being for or against Donald Trump? Well, this was a topic of discussion last week on the Ochelli Effect, in which the special guest was Carmine Savastano, who is the author of the book Two Princes and a King that covers all these murders that happened in the 1960s. Well, I've got a link to their entire discussion with this video, but I want to highlight for you a segment from it and have some remarks at the end.
Moving along, though, like I said, it was a different time period, and we need to recognize that because there was this refreshed kind of idea. There was a lot of change occurring, and that's why I mentioned civil rights, and that's why we also need to mention the murder of Medgar Evers. We need to mention the the destruction and all the stuff that happened with the Black Panthers.
The bombings of churches in the South.
Malcolm X, regardless of who you think is actually responsible there was a lot of, there was a lot of change happening, and there was a lot of visceral reaction to it.
Well,
also,
I'd say that. I want to say this correctly. In a way, using the title that I used with my book, a young political prince was struck down and murdered beside his young wife in a public street. Kennedy's death transformed the American landscape from an idealistic and thriving society compared to mythical Camelot to a bleak and gray landscape filled with suspicion and confrontation. His successor, Johnson, was often incapable of graceful diplomacy, a longtime corrupt political operator, and hard for many to accept in the wake of his fallen predecessor. A shadow began to form, not just upon the White House, but upon American politics, because a line had been crossed. A potential bright American future was dashed, and some were looking to blame others with or without justification.
And then with the emergence of the Vietnam War, and quite honestly, what do the three murdered individuals that are the subject of your book have in common in my mind? What stands out, besides the fact that they were famous people, they were politically significant? It is this. They utilized the platforms which gave them a tremendously loud voice, and each of them spoke profoundly about the concept of peace. And, I don't see that today, and I really have not seen that very much over the course of my lifetime. So this, in my mind, is what makes them special. It is not that they are, superhuman individuals, but really, honestly, having the guts to go out and speak about peace when you have the ability to make war, when you have the ability to cause riots, when you have the ability to sway crowds to do many things, whether it be chanting or getting violent or, making moves that cause other people's homes and businesses to be burned to the ground, to take that platform and to spend a significant amount of time speaking about the commonality between enemies and to speak about the need for the peaceful resolution of our differences is something that you don't hear from the loudest voices. And I say again, I was born in 1972, and I do not recall all that many loud voices who had platforms like these three men doing that. So this is what is significant to me. Anyway, I'm done making my commentary because I want to move along with the discussion. And, 3/4 of the first hour is gone, so I want to get to it. But okay. But I think this needs to be said here.
Well, no, I agree. I agree with you that the peace aspect of the three of these men is one of the connecting things between them, and it is one of the important things because there is, you and I have had conversations off the air, and I've talked to other people just about how there is right now in America no anti-peace movement. I mean, there are there's tacit organizations. That
you mean an anti-war movement?
Oh, sorry, anti-peace movement. Yeah, my fault. I've transposed the terms.
It's okay.
Yes, there is no real anti-war movement in America at all. Everybody's just basically given up. I mean, there's groups that are operating with funding and everything, but you don't see commercials by them. You don't see them out in the streets. You don't see them decrying the Republicans and Democrats. That's the thing. I remember once upon a time when you couldn't be a Democratic primary candidate and support illegal wars. That doesn't apply anymore. Everybody does now because everybody's making money on it.
Right. Right.
So that doesn't bother anyone. That's why, I mean, people said I was crazy for doing it, but I didn't vote for Trump or Hillary. And I won't vote for either again if they run someone like her, too. And I've heard her saying she's going to run again. Well, you know what? Then she's going to get beat again a third time because some people don't realize that they need new ideas.
And that's the thing, the old tired rhetoric of, well, you got to be with me because of my genitals. The orientation of my genitals should determine your vote.
Which is what they complain about Trump saying.
Well, yeah, but that was the thing. Remember, how could you be a woman and not vote for Hillary Clinton? And it was like, hello, 1972 called, and they really would like their ideas back. Yeah. Okay, because this is old and tired. I want
you to stop saying you're her.
Yeah, exactly. So let's continue on with this discussion though and get into some of these areas. I just wanted to make sure that we laid the groundwork properly about this because, again, when Larry Hancock's on, especially, which by the way I miss Larry, we got to get him back on again. We'll have to create another series.
well, we still got to do a modern episode for the 101. So
this is true. This is true.
So you can always do that, yeah, and then, 201 or whatever we decide.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll get Larry back on, but I love the fact that Larry always painstakingly goes through the effort of making sure to put these things in context. And quite honestly, I feel as though he is, extremely correct when he does this in his writing, in his presentations, and well measured, and I want to try and emulate it. I know I'm not always good at it, guys, but I'm doing the best I can to be like Larry Hancock on this type of issue. So go ahead.
We'll have to get you a WWLD bracelet.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, so as I was saying, and I do want to talk about the anti-war movement more in the after effect, I should say.
Sure.
The shadow began to spread over the most contentious topics of the day. As LBJ fueled the Vietnam War, with greater funding it caused dissension and rebuke not just from political opponents but the young Americans being drafted. As the war dragged on with little verifiable progress or victories that might decisively end the encounter, a growing resentment and unrest began to seethe within the United States. The anti-war movement was energized by the failures of Vietnam, yet neither political side would compromise. Many anti-war leaders sought an immediate withdrawal that realistically could not be executed without logistical nightmares, and were dismissed by officials. Conversely, many officials refused to admit the anti-war movement's ideas were correct, and Vietnam was a losing battle that would only exact a greater toll upon the United States without justifying the cost of American lives and resources. Yet neither side would compromise, or find a common ground where progress might occur. So the war machine rolled on, consuming gold and lives beyond any point of reason. As expected, both sides demonized the other. Those who would not support the war faced calls of being un-American, commies, hippies, and degenerates. Those who supported the troops were labeled baby killers, supporters of tyranny, fascists, and Nazis. The entire situation has a familiar sound and tone. During the spring afternoon in Memphis, civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King is assassinated on the balcony outside his room at the Lorraine Motel. News of his death spreads like wildfire and causes a series of riots in over 100 cities outraged by this second death of an influential leader in less than 5 years. As the rage subsides and the cities were rebuilt, America was a different place, less seemingly honorable, less willing to consider the problems of the day without assigning blame to political opponents. It may be that real civility was never a part of politics, but at least the attempt to be reasonable seemed to be at times. Less than 3 months later, Senator Robert F. Kennedy won the Democratic primary in California. He seemed to be the likely candidate to face and defeat Richard Nixon, as his brother Pryor had. And Kennedy was gunned down in the pantry of that same hotel. The last vestiges of progressive idealism based wholly on reason, empathy, and convincing opponents instead of just condemning their ideas and demonize them seemingly died as well. Richard Nixon's betrayal of the public trust and the legal activities carried out in his behalf further added disillusionment, suspicion, and the divide of political factions increased with greater regularity. Economic downturns, government corruption, scandals, foreign engagements, and the once resilient people of the United States no longer trusted their leaders or those who disagreed with them. Motivations likely attributable to selfishness or incompetence were ascribed to a more nefarious tinge. People began to...
In addition, this is also the time period where domestic policing by the FBI was being conducted in such a way that, we didn't necessarily know all of the truth of it at the time, but, the people who were the subjects of it certainly knew what was happening. Mm-hmm. They were complaining about it.
Yeah. The FBI and CIA with chaos, I believe.
There you go.
That? Yeah.
Well, there's that, but then there's also the rather public outcry, which was caused by the releasing of information that, our CIA was involved in these assassination plots, and our CIA was involved in, election tampering and everything else, and there were military assets that were in places they shouldn't be, and we have covered extensively a slew of investigations which occurred during the 1970s in the wake of Watergate.
MK Ultra came out after with the Senate Select Committee.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and then the idea that it wasn't merely what it is the United States was willing to do to its enemies, but what it was willing to do to its own citizens through COINTELPRO, through MK Ultra, through various other programs, and all of a sudden, listen, you've seen your leadership murdered, you've seen voices of dissent silenced. You've seen, there was other things going on under the skin, if you will. And it only makes sense that there would be a disillusionment with the authorities that be.
Hey, this is Mike Swanson. I'm back. Now, what I want to tell you is my book, The War State, isn't about the legacy of these assassinations that took place in the 1960s, but what it does is it's my attempt to explain the environment that led up to them, because our country changed not just in the 1960s, but after World War II, with the dawn of the Cold War and the creation of the military-industrial complex and a power elite that surrounded it. And I believe those historical factors were the road to those assassinations in the 1960s. So grab my book, The War State, and you'll see what I mean. And also grab Carmine Savastano's book and pay attention to the Ochelli Effect. I'm on there as a guest fairly frequently on Tuesdays, so go there and check it out.